Hello Summoners and welcome back to another episode of Pro Counters. With so much variety in the meta on patch 9.19, it's going to be a perfect time to discuss some potential counters to help you in your climb. We're going to go over counterpicks for every role and also discuss why we chose them. Let us know below in the comments if you have any feedback, suggestions, or think that we missed an important pick. But before we get started, make sure you go to ProGuides.com if you want to see huge improvements in your rank. We upload video guides similar to this one on our website every day. As of now, we're currently uploading a challenger gameplay analysis guide for every single champ, so make sure to click that link below. Also, we have an exclusive coaching feature called Play with a Pro, which provides instant on-demand 24/7 coaching from the best of the best. Trust me guys, you don't want to miss out on this, so sign up today. Now with that being said, let's jump right into it. Starting in the top lane, our first pick is going to be Yorick. As a forceful split pushing champion equipped with sustain, he's a good answer to many other bruisers. Statistically, he wins a lot of his games versus Darius, Renekton, and Pantheon, who are all exceptionally strong picks right now. Especially at level 6, when he gains access to his ult, he gains some immense kill pressure versus many of these opponents. Yorick's kit provides him tools to force long extended fights if he lands his abilities. With his cage and his slow, he's able to make it very difficult for his opponents to back out, and instead he forces them to fight back unless they're okay taking a lot of damage for free. His ultimate combined with the extra ghouls that assist Yorick make him very difficult to beat in a 1v1. It's more like a 1 versus 2.5 with all of his buddies helping him out. Even if his enemies poke him out, Yorick's Q has a good amount of sustain attached to it. As long as waves are pushing into him, he's able to slowly heal back up and prepare himself for a long extended trade. While a lot of meta champions prefer team fighting, Yorick's immense split pushing pressure really puts them in a bad spot. If his opponents group up and can't force a fight, they are certain to lose a turret or even two, maybe even an inhibitor. Next up, we have Shen. If you haven't played as or versus one, you definitely won't know about how oppressive his Q-empowered auto attacks are. Grasp of the Undying, his passive shield, and Q and shield bash all add up to make Shen one of the best champions in terms of trading in the early game. Like Yorick, Shen is also a powerful split-pushing champion. Although he might not dominate in every single top lane matchup, he has a lot of ones that are 50-50 or even slightly in his favor. As the game starts to progress, however, he does soft counter pretty much every champion that likes to split push. Shen is able to always match a split pusher while being one click away from joining his team whenever they need him. You'll want to pick Shen not only as a lane counter, but also as a counter to enemy team compositions that rely too heavily on basic attacks. His W is most unique as it really creates a dodge zone for his teammates. Essentially, it's like Jax's Counter-Strike, but it gives it to everybody who's in the circle. Alright, our last top lane pick is a classic counter with Malphite. Everybody knows that when you pick 5 AD champs, it's a go next when you play versus Rammus or Malphite. Following his buffs in previous patches, Malphite isn't really a solid counter pick now because he's pretty strong in pretty much every single game. You can pick him solely based off of matchups and he'll be able to reliably impact the game. Physical damage champions obviously are going to struggle against him, and those who rely on basic attacks are not in for a fun time. Whether it's longer trades with his E or poking out opponents with Q, Malphite is a solid pick who beats several popular picks like Jax, Pantheon, Renekton, Fiora, Aurelia, and Riven, and they will all have a hard time against him. Towards the later parts of the game, Malphite is able to hard engage or make picks with his ultimate. In the case that a diver is fed on the enemy team, he can instead reserve his ultimate for them and turn the fight that follows a 4v5. After coming out of lane ahead, however, it's more realistic that Malphite can constantly push his opponents in and roam to initiate team fights. And here's a recap of the champions we talked about for top lane. Alright, let's move on to the jungle. Our first jungle pick is going to be Master Yi, who's already pretty popular and picked blindly sometimes. He's a great answer to some junglers who are pretty strong right now like Nidalee, Elise, Mundo, and Kayn. Master Yi farms the jungle really fast and scales really hard because seriously, this guy does a lot of damage in the late game, and all it really takes is one good team fight for him to start popping off. Against Mundo specifically, Master Yi is one of the few champions who can punish Mundo for trying to take a really long extended fight. Part of this is because Master Yi's build naturally counters really tanky champions, with the true damage from his E and Conqueror, plus the percentage HP damage from Blood Razor and Blade of the Ruined King if you build it. Against Kayn, he is very happy to power farm very similar to the way that Kayn wants to. If Kayn chooses Shadow Form later on, Master Yi can use his Meditate to block Kayn's initial burst. If Kayn chooses his Darken form, he can instead use his Q to try to dodge Ross's W. Other champions like Nidalee and Elise can get punished hard if they get caught out by Yi, and are also under a lot of pressure to shut him down. While Elise definitely does have an easier time early on because of her stun, Nidalee is out of luck if she ever lets Master Yi get on top of her. Whenever he's in a good matchup, Master Yi can reliably hit the late game where he can either hard carry teamfights or transition into split pushing. Regardless of what he chooses though, he can excel at both, and the main condition is that he's able to stabilize the early game. Our second jungle pick is Zac. He holds one of the highest win rates versus Master Yi specifically, but he can also do very well versus other aggressive junglers. The reason for this is that he's able to gank so well and so often. Junglers who focus more on farming, like Master Yi, will find that their laners won't be able to hold their own when they're constantly facing ganks from Zac. What's a counters video without some counters to counters? Other popular picks like Elise, Lee Sin, and Mundo really struggle versus him because he can accomplish what they want to do but more reliably. Lee Sin's engage is much less reliable, and Elise's ganks are harder to pull off, and Mundo can be kited when he tries to dive the backline. On top of this, Zac's early game tankiness makes it hard for champions like these to skirmish with him. Since he can stall for so much more time, his opponents will have to think twice about going for extended fights that could turn into a skirmish. He's received some buffs to his passive this patch, meaning that his overall power level is definitely on an upward trajectory. And here's a recap of our jungle champions. Now, let's talk about mid laners. First up for mid is the 1v9 mid lane terror himself, Kassadin. He's an exceptionally strong counterpick to many AP assassins, like Katarina, Sylas, Fizz, Echo, and LeBlanc. Since his lane matchups into these champions are solid, he can consistently come out of the laning phase ahead and proceed to start outscaling them. Also, his natural power level makes him stronger than practically every other character in the game's roster. The biggest factor holding Kassadin back is his lack of wave clear and dangerous early game. It's really not advised to pick Kassadin blindly, but instead as a counter pick, because that's how you'll get the best results with him. When playing against AD champions, Kassadin is basically holding on for dear life the entire time because his kit is not designed to brawl with them effectively. Kassadin's mobility, insane damage, split pushing, team fighting, and scaling make him one of the best champions to pick as long as you come out of the laning phase at least in an okay spot. Next up in the mid lane is Swain. We've mentioned him as both a mid laner and a support in several of our other videos, but he's definitely worth bringing up again. Especially at 2 items, Swain is an oppressive champion to play against. He becomes unkillable and does so much damage. Right when you think you're about to kill him, he either uses Zhonya's to stall for more time or releases his ultimate and nukes everyone. He has these short bursty trades which allow him to look for poke during all stages of the laning phase. Once he hits level 6, he's able to take advantage of his oppressive all-in. Even champions like Yasuo, who prefer longer drawn-out fights, cannot consistently beat Swain because of the HP drain on his ultimate. Those who prefer shorter trades like Vladimir and Zed need to be ready for Swain's attempts at forcing these extended trades. Shorter range champions like Malzahar are always going to put themselves at risk anytime they want to farm. Our last mid lane pick is Galio. Like Kassadin, he's another great pick into many AP assassins. He's a good pick into Katarina and Akali especially. Nevertheless, his win rates are still solid versus Fizz, Echo, LeBlanc, Zoe, and Akali. Basically, when you play Galio, you're just too tanky for a lot of these champions to try and kill. On the flip side, you can try to look for heavy trades anytime your opponents start to miss position, or instead look to poke with your Q whenever they try to farm. Melee assassins are under a lot of pressure, because anytime you charge up your taunt, there's always the threat that your jungler is nearby to help you. After chunking out your opponents after just one trade, you can constantly pressure a solo kill or zone out your opponent. Do not underestimate Galio's damage. Come the later stages of the game, Galio continues to be a hard counter to so many different assassins. He can use his ultimate to protect his allies, and also use his taunt to CC lock any enemies trying to dive. Once he's caught in his W, Galio and his teammates can easily pop off whenever he hits them and make it really question what they were thinking. Alright, as we wrap up mid lane, make sure to check out these mid lane builds one more time. Let's move on to the bot lane. Our first pick is one that we've mentioned several times as an underrated pick. It's pretty clear to our analysts that Kog'Maw is a pick who is able to thrive in specific scenarios. He does pretty well versus low-range champions with little kill threat. Kai'Sa, Xayah, and Lucian all suffer because of the range disadvantage they have when Kog'Maw activates his W. In the case of Ezreal, it's a free farm lane as well, and Kog'Maw is a champion who's completely fine with that. As one of the hardest hyper carries in the game, Kog'Maw is a great pick to punish several popular ones. Overall, the picks that Kog'Maw does well versus are actually strong picks themselves. The fact that Kog'Maw can beat them in lane and outscale them is a perfect reason to add him to your champion pool. Next up is Heimer. He got a buff this patch, so it's time to raise your dongers and take him for a spin in the bot lane. This guy is super oppressive, deals magic damage, and provides a lot of objective control. You'll want to pick him as a counter to low range champions like Lucian, Xayah, and Kai'Sa once again, and we also recommend him versus Caitlyn because his ability to push the lane allows him to neutralize that laning phase, which is technically a win since she's one of the most popular lane bullies at the moment. Heimer's ability to push the lane constantly and poke out with his abilities allows him to slowly whittle down his enemy's health bars. If they try to play too aggressively and force an all-in, they can only win if Heimer doesn't have any turrets set up or ready. Once he reaches level 6, it becomes even harder to force these fights because he can create an upgraded turret that'll deal a ton of damage. While he can't take turrets as quickly as a traditional marksman, he's not super slow at taking them either once he builds enough AP, and he will still contribute plenty of turret damage when sieging. Here's a quick recap of the bot lane builds. Alright, let's wrap it up with support. Poppy's support has been floating around here and there, and we feel like it's finally a good time to give her some exposure. You'll want to pick her into champions that rely on some sort of dash, like Pyke, Alistar, Braum, Yuumi, or Leona. She'll be able to disengage any aggression and also ground her enemies if they're trying to escape with her W. While she's not played as a support very often, our analysts don't think she's a bad pick. You might not want to pick her blind because other aggressive supports have more reliable CC, but as a counter pick, she's arguably just as strong as any other champion. Out of lane, her W is still one of the most useful abilities in the game. You can pick her into a good matchup bottom, and there are several other champions on the enemy team that she can ground. It's definitely worth picking up Poppy just for the utility. Our final pick for support is Sona. While she's a terrifying bot laner as well, we're going to focus more on the traditional support role. She's still a strong pick into Morgana, Rakan, and Pyke because of her ability to trade and sustain back up. As long as she maintains her distance, champions like these will have to move very far forward in order to play aggressive. By constantly poking out her opponents beforehand or building up a wave, she can continue to trade back and slowly chip away at her opponent's health bars. Especially when she has her power cord loaded up, her trades become nasty and it's difficult to beat her unless you can land a clean catch on her. At the end of it all, she's still an amazing support in the late game and one of the best, actually. She provides extra damage, sustain, and mobility for her teammates, as well as her massive AoE stun. Very few supports can match the amount of utility that Sona provides, so make sure to pick her in safe matchups that you can dominate, scale up, and 1v9 the game from the support position. And here's a quick recap for all of the builds that we mentioned for support. That concludes this episode of Pro Counters. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys want more content to help you improve, check out ProGuides.com, where we've teamed up with pro players to create guides designed to help you take your game to the next level. Also, keep an eye out on our YouTube channel where we're constantly updating it with new content just like this. Good luck on the Rift, and we will see you all next time.